Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here, episode 2514 of The Tom Woods Show with Jane Johnson, who has a growing archive of pieces at Mises.org. She's got a resume as long as my arm. She lived in Seattle for quite some time where she taught, and then like a sensible person decided to get out of there. We'll have plenty to talk about, no doubt, but Jane, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, so I first took notice of you because I read Mises.org.
Mm-hmm.
And you were in fact, somebody told me that a mutual friend of ours kind of either, I don't know, spotted you out in the wild or something, or maybe invited you to contribute to Mises.org. I don't remember how that happened.
Well, it could be Alex Pollock. Do you know him?
It's possible.
He's a fellow at Mises. I wrote him email, him and Paul Kubiak, who's still at AEI. They were both at AEI at the time. They were writing a lot about the Federal Reserve, and many of us have had concerns about the Fed in recent years, the monetary policy being implemented and so forth. And I asked them a simple question about a piece they had published about the Fed, and both of them responded, and I had ongoing conversations with them, especially with Alex, who had by then moved to Mises Institute as a fellow. So he and I have sort of been in touch for some months now, a couple of years perhaps. I can't recall when this started. And I'd never really looked at the Mises Institute website, but I began looking at it because I knew he was affiliated with Mises. And then I noticed that some of the topics that people wrote about were of great interest to me. And I thought, I'd like to make some comments on some of these Mises-related issues. I'm kind of libertarian, but with a small L, not a large capital L.
That's how a lot of us feel.
That's right. I've never voted Libertarian Party, looked at it, but never voted. But a lot of what I see in the Mises material on the website, and I certainly knew who Ludwig von Mises was, really appealed to me. And I began realizing I had some things I'd like to contribute here.
Okay, well,
so I did, yeah.
We are always glad to welcome a new person into the fold, and particularly a person who can pronounce Mises. That's a novelty.
That's a good point. No, I studied the history of economic thought as an undergraduate, at least. And so I certainly know the reputation of the Austrian school and so forth.
Well, let's start with the subject matter of one of your pieces. And this will be a little bit of a potpourri episode as the listeners get to know you. But you wrote in particular about the ongoing problem of the federal debt. And the thing is, every time that comes up, probably over the past year or two on this show, my conclusion is, back 15 years ago when I was but a naive lad, mm-hmm. I thought maybe if we come up with some kind of detailed proposal by which we might be able to get the deficit down and mm-hmm. by extension not add as much to the debt, and then maybe mm-hmm. start reversing the debt. Maybe we might get a handle on this. And then I realized that's not happening. No one cares. There's no political constituency for this.
Right.
And so that's where we are. I mean, I'm concerned about it, but in a way, it's almost a relief to know, well, nothing can be done, it's just going to all collapse.
Yeah. No, I'll just interject a comment here. I think there's a mentality among the populace these days. It's like a virus infection, if you will, to make an analogy to what we were through the last 3 to 5 years. This thing called modern monetary theory, MMT, has infected. Nobody wants to really mention this. It's a squirrely offshoot economic theory that no reputable people really buy into. As far as I'm aware, it's a minority viewpoint, not given much credence. But
well, they say that about the Austrians too.
No, not the same way. The problem with MM,
No,
yeah,
that's true.
I see your point, but the
But
problem
even
with
Paul Krugman does not care for them, and you might think he might at least lean in their direction, but he does not.
the problem with MMT is it's so seductive. Just to use a word, it's so seductive. The first person, I'll tell you, this is kind of funny, that told me of MMT was several years ago. I hadn't heard of it because I don't read anything that would branch off in that direction. But this is a person who lives in Seattle. In fact, she's my husband's ex-wife. She had emailed me to ask me if I could explain how the Federal Reserve works because she had read about modern monetary theory. And if we only just print money and spend it on all these good causes, we'd have this idyllic life. Why can't we just do this? We can print up more money and spend it. Well, I tried to take her in hand and tell her, hey, guess what? You're barking up the wrong tree with me anyway. But I gave her an earful. And then I began looking up articles about MMT and realized what a scourge it is. I don't know what other word to use. It's really
So
hard
what's the gist of it?
well, it's infected a vast number of people without their even realizing that they're infected with it.
Right, they've never even heard of it, but yet their brains have absorbed it somehow.
I really think it's like a virus. I don't know if I should draw that analogy too much, but I really think that there's an infectious MMT virus that has taken hold. And well, why can't we just print up more money and send it? After all, printing dollar bills is pretty quick and easy. They don't cost that much to produce or anything. Why can't we just do this? And you could give everybody some free housing if we're short of housing. You could pay off all the student loans if those are bugging people and burdening these kids. We could do everything we ever talked about and have a beautiful life. And why not? Why are we doing this? Well, we know why we're not doing this. Those that have thought through this at all clearly understand why you can't just do this. But she was fully convinced that this would be so straightforward and so easy. Why can't the politicians just vote to do this? So I finally told her, I think you're so unhappy living in the United States, you should find another country to move to. And I never heard back from her after many exchanges about this. So anyway, that's the story. But MMT is infectious.
This matter of the debt, in an
Yes.
article you wrote for Mises that I'll put in the description here, you went through some exercises,
Yes.
perhaps facetiously, but exercises as to, okay, what exactly would be involved
Yes.
if we actually decided that the debt was something we needed to pay off?
Yes.
What would that look like? What kinds of approaches might we take?
There were two approaches. The simpler one would be just take the total outstanding debt, which at the time I wrote the piece a few months ago, was about 34 trillion, if you can even get your mind around that big a number. 34, it's about 35 trillion by now, probably. And the population of the United States is about 331 or so million. So you do the division, you divide this 34 trillion by 131 million. And I'm looking through the piece here. What did I get as the quotient? I got the current population that I got off of a website from the Census Bureau, 334 million and change on January 1st, 2023. If you do that division, if everybody could pay this off, every man, woman, and child per capita could pay this, they would owe $101,725.18 at that time for every man, woman, and child. $101,712. Well, that's a lot for a lot of people. But some people have retirement savings, at least that much or more, and people do have savings accounts. And so maybe that could be feasible, but you'd have to get the population to buy into the idea. But so that was one little simplistic approach. Then I made it a little more sophisticated. And I said, think of it as an amortized mortgage. You're taking on a mortgage of $34 trillion to build your dream house somewhere. And what would your monthly payments have to be for 30 years to pay that off? This is assuming no other problems like pandemics and natural disasters and so on and so forth. But just what would it take in terms of 30 years of monthly payments, like a mortgage, advertising? You're paying off your principal and your interest every month, month by month, to pay this off. Well, the figure, if you work that out with a programmable calculator or an Excel spreadsheet or trying to do it by hand or whatever, you get the same result. You get a payment every month per capita of $434.94. So $435 for every man, woman, and child every month for 30 years, an amortized mortgage. Well, doesn't sound too awful. But then, of course, that assumes there are no other emergencies that pop up, as I said. And so it's the odds of being able to do that are pretty slender, I think. But that's what just crunching the numbers. That's what I came up with. And then, of course, I concluded this is all very facetious and it's fatuous to think that you could actually carry this out and do it. So then I wanted to conclude this with something succinct to leave in the mind of the reader. There are only 4 ways that any government, can get its hands on resources. One of which is confiscating property. But we don't allow that in this country because we have a takings clause in the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution that says you can't take private property, bank accounts, or anything from a person without just compensation. That's the phrase in the the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, one of our Bill of Rights amendments. The takings clause, they call it. So we kind of rule out confiscation as a method of getting government's hands on productive resources from the private sector. The second way you could try to do it is taxation. I don't think we could tax ourselves enough to pay off this outstanding debt. I don't think the American people have the wherewithal and the confidence and the trust in the legislative branch and the executive, government in general, to say, yeah, you can increase my taxes to pay off the debt. Maybe it'll happen someday, but it's a hard thing for me to visualize. A third way is to issue more debt to pay off debt. And that sounds like a vicious cycle that you don't want to get into. But the fourth way, and this exhausts the list of ways to get government's hands on productive resources. The fourth way is inflation. If you allow the currency to inflate enough over time, the outstanding debt effectively becomes less and less, smaller and smaller. And that's just a known fact in general, that if you are a borrower, which the United States is, you hope there's inflation because it's going to inflate away the debt. If you're running the federal government, inflation is very beneficial. It's going to inflate away that debt. I think the inflation we've been seeing, just to interject this comment that went as high as 90% or so briefly a couple of years ago, could be only a harbinger of things to come. And everybody now is saying, oh, when can the Fed cut interest rates? When do we get inflation under control? When do my grocery prices and gas prices start going down? I want them to be down to where they were in 2019. They're never going to come down to that level, but people expect that, I think. They're assuming it's not going to happen, but I think inflation's on the horizon. And I say this as somebody that lived through the inflation of the late 60s on into the 70s and into the early 80s that took a major recession with about 10% unemployment for a while to cure that bout of inflation. Many people aren't still living who experienced that at that time, but I was there. I experienced it. We were all caught up in it. And I wouldn't be surprised if in my remaining lifetime that we're headed in that direction. But maybe they're going to get it under control. Maybe the Fed can do this. I don't know. I would not put money on it personally, but we'll see. But inflation is the thing that benefits borrowers. It hurts lenders, but it benefits borrowers because you're paying off debt in cheaper dollars, so to speak, cheaper in terms of what they're actually worth. This is a very Misesian concept, a dilution of the currency, letting the currency inflate to the point where it's not worth what it ever used to be. And we don't have we're not on a gold standard or anything, any kind of standard. It's fiat money. It's pieces of paper. And we've been in this since, 1971, I guess, when we left the gold standard the last time, when Nixon closed the gold window, as they called it at the time. So it's been a while. We've been on a fiat currency. So,
hey, everybody, quick word from Woods here. It's my goal to have the best supporters program out there, better than anything on Patreon or anywhere else. Support the Tom Woods Show, and not only do you get entry into my no censorship Tom Woods Show elite group, but you also get the 16-page Tom Woods elite letter mailed to your home every month. Who else is doing that? This is all new material, completely different from the emails I send, and it is red hot. My supporters also get invites to my murder mystery dinner parties that I've been holding around the country. I'll be adding more cities soon to woodsmystery.com. I hold these in penthouse suites at luxury hotels with a beautiful catered dinner. It's a ton of fun. I also invite my supporters to my annual Christmas party, and the higher up you go as a supporter, the more things you get. Some supporters even get a small gift in the mail from me every month in addition to the newsletter. So go check it out, supportinglisteners.com. You will not believe all the goodies at supportinglisteners.com, and my profound thanks to all of you. There is a perhaps somewhat radical approach whereby the federal government could do what any other entity does in this situation and massively sell off assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not everyone's ready for that. Not everyone's ready for anything, really. They just want life to go on as before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the federal government has a lot of assets. We have national parks, we have forest land, we have grazing land for livestock. A lot of this is federal property. And you raise a very good point. I've heard this raised before. I haven't looked into the details, but what the percentage of land mass in this country is federally owned, but it's sizable as far as I understand. So, yeah, of course, the more you put on the market, the less value it may reach over time. So you'd need to parcel it out carefully if they ever tried to do this. I don't think it'd be a very popular notion.
No, it wouldn't. But I'm just, as you were saying, maybe these other approaches wouldn't be super popular either, but they've painted us into such a corner that we're reduced to approaches like this. But now, what do you say to people who say, you scaremongers have been saying things like, $34 trillion or $35 trillion. You can't even conceive how much money that is. Yeah, you said that when it was 30, when it was 25, when it was 20, and life seems to go on. So, why should I worry about some abstraction like the national debt when anything I do to fix it is going to cause me immediate pain? I'm not feeling any pain from the debt. Why not just leave it?
That's the common belief among, if you could really pin people down, the man on the street, and take a survey and ask that kind of question, I think you'd stop everybody. I don't think people even want to think in that direction. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's a popular thing to think about. What it would take to get people to think in those terms, I kind of draw a blank on that myself. But maybe it's worth contemplating on and thinking of it and giving it some thought. But selling off natural resources, the nation's resources, a lot of which is federal land, is a distinct possibility.
But I mean, if you were talking to the man on the street who says, "I'm not interested in anything you have to say because I have zero interest in this problem that people have been, harping on for years, and it doesn't seem to have done anything. So why should I worry about it? Maybe it'll be a problem 150 years from now, but I won't be around to see it."
Yeah, that's a prominent thought. Well, the debt service is something to draw people's attention to. We are now at the point, as I understand it, spending as much on debt service, just paying the interest, not even repaying the principal, but paying the interest on the 34 trillion. We're spending as much on that as we are on military. Now, that's a low bar because we're not spending on military what we used to during the Cold War. And in fact, that is becoming a concern in today's world, I think. So that may be one way to draw people's attention to it. And your kids and your grandkids and their grandkids are going to be paying interest out into years from now, way on this outstanding balance, unless you plan to default. And that raises all kinds of ugly questions, scenarios. That if you start asking people about that, if they even know the term reneging on debt or defaulting on debt, I don't know how they'd respond. I don't know.
How long ago were you last on a college campus?
Well,
teaching.
For teaching. Oh, yeah. It's been some years. It was back in the 1990s. I've been retired for a while.
Okay, so that's an interesting question because last time I've done some speaking appearances here and there, but in terms of ensconced on that campus for a while, for me, it was the early 90s for undergrad and then late 90s for grad school. But in grad school, I wasn't really, quote, on the campus. I mean, I went in to see my advisor from time to time, but I wasn't really involved in campus life, as they call it. But even then, you could tell that things were starting to spin the wrong way. But it was mild compared to what we see now. But I did still nevertheless see at that time, I've given this example before, but when I took the history of the Middle East as a freshman, we were taught by a professor named Zachary Lockman, who I think is now at NYU. And to my astonishment, he required us to buy our books at a Maoist bookstore called Revolution Books. And I took one step in there, and I was just telling my friend this story the other day. It was like Abraham Simpson walking into the burlesque house. He walks in, takes 3 steps, sees Bart there, turns right around and leaves. I said, over my dead body, am I buying my books here?
Yeah.
But it wasn't like there was still space for dissenting voices. I don't know what it would be like to spend a career there now.
Very good point. I cannot shed any light on that for you, but I will give you my example. The mid-'80s, I was teaching at a 4-year private college in Seattle, and it was money and banking class, which I taught many times at a couple different places, institutions. I had mostly business students. They were finance and accounting majors. They knew what they were talking about. And they had the instructors in those classes giving them background on this. To a person, these kids said, outright, I expect never to see anything from Social Security. Flat out statement. And I tried to get them to talk more about this, saying, why are you saying this? This was before the last blue ribbon commission that Reagan appointed sort of salvaged the Social Security program by increasing payroll taxes and bumping up the earliest retirement date at which you could claim Social Security. To fix the program for several decades. And now again, we're at the point where it needs a big fix, and nobody wants to face that. And the two guys running for president this year, neither of them will even touch it, because as everybody knows, it's the hot wire. What do they call it? It's the
tripwire.
The third rail. The third rail. And the third rail. Touch it and you're dead.
Well, all they want to do is increase it. Like they won't even concede there's an issue. And that's partly because Trump is appealing to a particular base that expects to benefit from the programs. And so we can't be adults and acknowledge that anything could go wrong. On the other hand, you can understand the frustration of some people who didn't understand the nature of the program. They really thought they were paying into some fund.
They did. They still do.
Yeah, we know there's an envelope with their name on it that is
a little account somewhere.
They're bank. Expecting that, and yet whenever the elites need some foreign project funded, somehow they manage to find the money for that. No problem. Now, I can understand people's frustration about that, but it doesn't make the problem any easier.
Yeah, I know this is a common misconception. Everybody that I hear speaking about Social Security, whether they're already retired or younger and looking forward to their benefits, I always make sure I explain to them that Social Security is not like an annuity. It's not guaranteed. It is, I call it an intergenerational redistribution of income program. That's all it is. And this is what FDR designed it to be back in the 30s. This was his kind of pet project, as I understand it. He wanted people to be taxed with a payroll tax and set this up this way so people think, oh, I've got my contributions in there. It's going to be mine, my benefits someday. And that is entrenched in people's heads, their minds. And it's a misconception. You cannot abuse them. Of the disabuse them, whatever the right word is, that they understand the reality. It's an intergenerational redistribution. So today's working people are paying the taxes to support me, my Social Security benefits today. But that doesn't mean they can necessarily expect anything 30, 40 years from now when they're retiring. There's no guarantee. And Congress at any time can change the payout rules, the benefit rules. They haven't much messed with it, but they could end the program or cut it back significantly or increase the payroll taxes if they need. They can do various things with it in Congress. And this is what people don't seem to understand. But, so the word needs to get out more on that. A lot of people don't.
I know. It's one of these things. It's like what St. Augustine is supposed to have said that, he's asking God to make him chaste or virtuous, but not yet. And so I think people feel that way, but, let me enjoy the programs. Or that was how everybody felt when at Harvard they said, we're going to crack down on grade inflation. Well, all of us said, great. As soon as we leave, you crack right on down on that. So, yeah, that's how we all feel. But on this general subject, though, of the higher education system, you've had some thoughts, nevertheless, as we all do, regardless of how much distance we have from them personally. You've had some thoughts about that, and so do you see? I have friends who think there's some kind of reckoning has to come. That we all know the cost is completely out of hand at this point. I mean, it's just laughable. We all know that. But we also know that increasingly it is, it's even more of an ideological, indoctrination center than it was when you and I were there. So you would think something has to give, and yet people, including parents, crave that credential so much. They want those bragging rights for their kids and to their neighbors. It's very hard to unplug people from it. So I don't know how the reckoning comes.
I don't either. And as I said, I think I mentioned, I don't think I'll live long enough to see the ultimate resolution of what's going to happen in higher education. We're presumably embarked on some kind of transition. I wrote another piece that was published on Mises. It's not one of the ones that you originally suggested to me for this discussion, but there was an Austrian economist, Joseph Schumpeter, who I guess could be considered part of the Austrian school. He immigrated to this country when it was time to get out of Austria and taught at Harvard for some years. Died not too many years ago. I'd have to look up his dates. But anyway, I wrote a piece about him. He had this very appealing theory, at least to me, about industry. And I consider higher ed as an industry. I call it the higher ed industry. It's a huge industry. And it's heavily subsidized by the federal government and state governments if it's public sector institutions. His theory was called creative destruction. And he wrote about it in several books, publications that he wrote. Capitalism, Socialism, Democracy was one of the others, where he pictured a natural, normal process of businesses and entities of various types. Starting up in business, being successful for a while, putting productive use to resources under good entrepreneurial management and so forth, and then declining at some point for whatever reason and failing. And he viewed this as a very natural process. Nothing wrong about it. It's kind of the way of the world. And he called it creative destruction. So it's kind of a idiosyncratic phrase, that an oxymoron or something, you might say. But I think there's a lot in that in both the private sector and in higher ed, the higher ed industry. I wrote a piece not too long ago. I don't know if you saw it. It came out a month or so ago, a couple months ago maybe, in which I discussed creative destruction and attributing it to Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter. And then I found lists of schools that have closed in recent years. And every year there's a list published of colleges. They're mostly schools you've never heard of. They're small places for the most part, some of them larger. And then what happens to the students? Well, they have to go somewhere else and transfer and so forth, but they get through it, And then it frees up productive resources like faculty, staff, library books, and so forth for other uses. And a campus that could be turned into a convention center, for example. This has happened in some settings. So there's always a churning going on. New institutions or corporations, business firms coming on board, running a lifespan, failing, going out of business, freeing up productive resources to do something else. And I think Schumpeter viewed this as a natural product of capitalism, the way of the world. And he saw nothing inherently wrong with it. He thought it was a natural process. So that's one way to view what might be going on in higher ed. But this whole scenario recently with the anti-Semitism on campuses, it's a very recent phenomenon, pretty recent, at least to make the headlines. And these presidents that are called up to testify in front of Congress and so forth, this has caused quite a disturbance in the whole industry. And when you get into anti-Semitism, it could get ugly pretty quickly. But this could be the harbinger of maybe more benign or less malign happenings in the higher ed community, the higher ed industry.
Yeah,
because
I don't know.
something's going on. Yeah.
Because I don't particularly like I'm not convinced about that.
You're not?
All that stuff. I mean, I don't like these university presidents either. I mean, I yield to no one in my dislike of these people.
Okay.
But I do think that some of that. I mean, what is her name? Elise Stefanik or something? She's a dope. I mean, she makes university presidents seem sympathetic. I wouldn't want to be questioned by her. She's a dope. But to me, the thing is, what I think we would see in any situation other than the universities would be, we've had this explosion in technology, in the ability to convey information over the past 30 years. I mean, it is astonishing how much more effectively and on a large scale we can convey information and teach skills.
Yeah.
And yet we are stuck in an institution that is literally from the 12th century. The 12th, 13th centuries.
Yeah.
And so you would think that it would evolve. But I think, as you're suggesting, one of the things that's holding it back from evolving is we have all these incentives to keep it going because we have big subsidies for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you subsidize something, we all know you get more of it. But then also there's this, as I was suggesting, this cultural factor of people measure their worth on the basis of what college they get into.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's very, very hard to say, well, you be the guinea pig for this brand new system we're going to implement. And no, you won't be able to tell your friends you're an Ivy League graduate, but you can say, you went to this new thing. Nobody wants that. So it's very hard. You have to have a cultural transformation, an institutional transformation, and and it's a lot to ask. But on the other hand, with these tuition prices and the rest of it, who can stay in the current situation for that long?
Yeah, that's a very deep, good question. I think market forces are going to have something to do with this. Going into the next fall, I had seen a few months ago tuition, room, and board rates at the Ivy schools going up to around $100,000 a year. I don't think they're quite that high yet. That might have been a scare tactic statement or something, but they're around 90,000 announced for this coming fall. The class that will be coming in September. How long can this last? Well, the thing is, the student loan problem is a huge part of the problem. Not only does it burden the students, we know about that. Trying to forgive loans is the totally wrong tack.
But it also pushes the tuition up.
Oh, obviously. Yes.
Yeah.
You talk about subsidies. Oh, yeah. The major subsidy for most of these expensive elite schools, and I went to one, you went to one, is the prices that they can charge. And then, of course, what do they do with the money? They don't hire more faculty. They don't hire the kind of technology that you're alluding to improve educational, instructional processes, the learning process. They hire DEI staff, bureaucrats. I think that's where most of the money has gone. If you look at the research that's been done, ACTA, American Council of Alumni and Trustees and Alumni, has done work every year for a while on where does this tuition money go? Because these colleges obviously bumped up their tuition in response to the loans that can be packaged in the financial aid packages that these students get. I'll tell you, my own college, which is considered one of the elite, expensive places, my senior year, which was way back, 1963, 64, the tuition, room and board and fees was $2,800 a year. If you plug $2,800 a year into an inflation calculator, which is online, it's really easy to use, put out by the Department of Labor, I think Bureau of Labor Statistics, that in equivalent dollars today is about 23, 24, 25,000. due to the inflation over these years, 16 years, let's say. But what does my college charge today? It's over 80. It's around 85,000.
Yeah.
So there you have what it would be if the tuition just went by the regular consumer price index, the CPI, which is published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 23, 24, 25,000 versus 85,000, which is what my college now charges. What is this? $60,000 gap?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do they do with the extra 60,000?
Well, if there's anything analogous to what's happened in secondary education, it's we've seen a dramatic increase in administration.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Here's the money, and here's the enrollment, and here are the administrators shooting straight up. So we certainly have that.
Yeah.
It's heaven knows what's going on, but it's not
mind-boggling.
It's not that you're getting that percentage better of an education. That we can be sure
you're getting worse, I think.
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, it triggered some of these thoughts. It's going to be somewhat due to market forces that force some kids to say, hey, I can go to a local community college and learn electrical wiring or how to be a plumber. We need people to do those things. It's a perfectly respectable training class.
Yeah.
To go into that kind of work. And these people, if you read the old book about the millionaire next door, those are not Ivy League graduates. They're people that run small businesses that do well managing their own little businesses. They don't live high on the hog. They live in modest houses, drive old cars. They don't spend a lot of money. They're not professionals, like not doctors or lawyers or something. The millionaire next door is typically the guy that runs his own small plumbing business, let's say, something like that. And this was written 20, 30 years ago, the book, The Millionaire Next Door. I read it when it came out, and I was deeply impressed at the findings in that book that they wrote about people ending up doing very well in life. So maybe it's a stigma to not go to college, but to go to a vocational program. But we're going to have to get over it. We're going to have to. That's going to be part of the cultural transformation.
Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you are getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you are a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. Or what if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking, meeting places getting shut down? Use your website as a lead generation engine. Or what if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO's expert search engine optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Yeah, well, I'll say this. I think the estimate people have of what it means to be an Ivy League graduate, like that has fallen considerably. In fact, I mentioned this a few months ago on the show, but this is my reunion year for
it's my reunion year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for me it's quite a few years, but so it's
my
reunion year.
Mine's more than yours.
Okay, well, all the same, I mean, I do go to my high school ones because those are all normal people. But I decided after going to a couple of the college ones, I just couldn't do it anymore. And so in our little class report that we all contribute to and then we get in the mail ahead of the reunion, I said the problem is, although I have very fond memories of my college years, the problem is right now I can predict every last opinion all of you hold. Every last one. And I don't understand why nobody thinks that's weird. I mean, it's not that these are all self-evidently true. These are very, very controversial issues, and you all come down, 99.9% of you all come down on the same side of them. Could this possibly be that you grew up going to an elite school thinking, I'm going to take my place among the elites, and the elites have made clear that we are to hold the following opinions? I'm not saying that they're consciously doing that, but that's just the way they're wired, is to be drawn to what the fashionable elite opinions are, and I just don't find that interesting. I would much rather talk to somebody, as you say, who's running a successful business, who has some common sense, and therefore would have some insights into the real world and how it works. That'd be interesting to me more than sitting around in some Ivy League echo chamber. I would have drinks for the purpose of numbing myself against what I have to sit there and endure.
Yeah, no, I share those feelings. Up until the time of, I didn't go to my it would have been the 60th reunion for me. That's a long time. I was thinking of going. I have a nice small group of friends that I would have liked to see, but I'm not sure they all went anyway to the reunion. But for couple years leading up to this reunion, I was part of a group of about 15 or 20 of us in my class who got together every couple of months on a Zoom meeting. And you talk about being wired to certain viewpoints. So every single one of those women, my college was a women's college when I was there, which I thought was fine. I liked it. It's co-ed now, but most of these schools are co-ed now. But I didn't identify with any of what these older women my age were saying in a lot of our Zoom conversations that I was invited to participate in because I had done earlier some work on reunion planning. I actually had been involved. And I had been to reunions every 5 years for some time. I confess I had. But over time, every 5 years, I found less and less in common with the people I had gone to college with. So similar to your experience, I think.
Yeah, indeed.
So,
we don't.
You go ahead.
No, you first.
Oh, I didn't come from an elite background, by the way. My father was a college professor at a cow college, a state college.
Oh no, I didn't either. I came from a blue collar background.
Oh, okay. Mine was.
But I think some people have this idea that now I'm going to break out. I'm going to be among the elites, and so they're much less likely to be true dissidents, because why rock the boat? Now you can finally be part of that elite that you've craved your whole life, and I haven't craved that. Thank God.
No,
I haven't craved that in the slightest.
No, I didn't either. I'm happy with the many directions my life took, and all the different things I've done. No regrets. But I don't think I ever pictured myself being part of the elite. But I attended, maybe you did too, on a large scholarship, and was recruited from a small town on the West Coast because of where I came from.
Right.
They were doing that in my day. I don't know if they're doing it so much. They called it geographical distribution. It was before affirmative action.
Yeah, I think it's a different kind of distribution these days. But
yeah.
Anyway, well, I'm gonna link to your archive of articles for people who are interested in reading it. I'll have it at tomwoods.com/2514, and also in the description of the video. So, Jane Johnson, I appreciate your time and your patience with me as we meandered through a variety of seemingly unrelated, but in some ways related topics. Thank you very much.
Good questions. I'm happy to engage with you anytime. It was fun.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.